this generation actually is having lower income than the parents' generation. There's no overnight magic wand to actually change some of this. It takes time. Globalization has led to loss of opportunity. That is what the production linked incentives, for instance, is. But the consumer is also, an employee. What are you doing for us? The government has been, working on this. Low cost production in China, does basically help the consumer. The middle class has not grown. Their earnings have just not grown. US manufacturing has hollowed out.
What's your opinion on the de-globalization that's happening, led by countries like US, which is saying that we need to decouple from, say, China, which is producing most of the goods? And I think a lot of it is based on the changing geopolitics, right? The changing demographics, the changing security concerns, and so on. And when you de-globalize, I think, and again, hats off to you, you know much more economies there. But Master Basket is a simple example, but say the whole defense industry in America, they say, well, I'm going to make each nut and bolt in each drone that I fly, the cost will go up. Yes. And I think this de-globalization is, it almost seems like the world is coming out of a choice that it made to globalize after the Second World War. How do you think that will affect the next 25 to 30 years?
De-globalization. I think here, if you look at what happened in the US from the 1990s onwards, right? US manufacturing has hollowed out. And, in some sense, this is a manifestation of the shareholder capitalism that has been pursued in the US. So cost reduction, etc. And if you look at, overall, even the share of surplus that has gone to labor has stagnated or in fact decreased, while share of value added that has gone to capital has basically grown, much more. And I think these are aspects that then sort of sow seeds for democracy to reap, right? I think that's very important to understand. The middle class has not grown; their earnings have just not grown. Cities like, if you take cities like Detroit in Michigan, which were actually flourishing cities because of the auto majors that were there, those cities are not, they've seen their best days. And that does start showing up. The problem, which is something which is important to understand, is that globalization has led to loss of opportunity. Trade has, we economists are actually do talk about comparative advantage. Yes, low cost production in China, does basically help the consumer. But the consumer is also, an employee. And if that employee does not basically get good jobs, his earnings don't increase, and this generation actually is having lower income than, let's say the parents' generation. That will eventually show up in political choices that people make. I think, in a democracy, it is important to also think about who are the winners and who are the losers. We economists many times only look at basically the overall pie, saying, the overall pie is expanding. Yes, but if that pie, from the pie expanding, large slices of the pie are going basically, let's say, to another country, then citizens in this country will indeed ask the question saying, what are you doing for us? And that is something which is, then shows up in political choice, and which is what is leading to some of the narratives against, globalization. I think it is important, that these are questions that I pose to my profession as well, that we have to also think about the medium to short run. Just to give an example, let's say the production linked incentive in India, which we introduced during COVID. People say, there are some commentators who talk about that's not good, etc. The simple point is that India manufacturing has not grown because policy has not been as supportive. Corrections have been implemented now. The last, I did my little bit. The government has been, working on this. There's no overnight magic wand to actually change some of this. It takes time. But when, the policy has become more favorable, manufacturing can grow. If domestic firms are not there to actually benefit from it, to basically provide employment, then that is not something that will actually work in a democracy. You have to provide, in some sense, let's say, from an inefficient equilibrium to an efficient equilibrium, you have to lay out that path, that bridge, to be able to, enable, the citizens and the ecosystem to move from the inefficient equilibrium to the efficient equilibrium. in economics, in academia, we write papers saying, bad equilibrium, good equilibrium. But in the real world, you have to lay out that path. And, that is what the production linked incentives, for instance, is. In a similar way, when you think about, globalization, those who are losing out, you have to lay out those bridges, enable them to actually acquire skills so that they can reskill themselves, go and work. And I think that is really important, because that's what if you have a democracy, and it's the social choices of democracy, economic choices of capitalism, then these short-run phenomena, short to medium-run phenomena, caring for losers is, I think, is very important.